Our final presentation for today comes from India. It's an initiative about negotiations and infrastructural projects for sustainable development. I'd like to invite Ms. Kritika Krishnamurthy, I hope I pronounced that well, the Honorary Director of the Bridge Policy Think Tank, a mediator with the World Bank and one of the trainers for the mediation training of the Ministry of Corporate Affairs in the Government of India. She's also the author of a best-selling book on mediation in India and a winner of many awards, including Future Legal Leaders, Forbes Legal Power List, and a Business World 40 Under 40. With Ms. Kritika, we also have Mr. Anurup Omkar, the Honorary Director at the same think tank, Bridge Policy, a mediator with the World Bank as well, and he is the youngest globally and first Indian ever to be nominated as a Distinguished Fellow to International Academy of Mediators. He's a consultant with many international organizations, including World Bank, on the topic of the micro, small, medium enterprises. His book, The Art of Negotiation and Mediation, was published by LexisNexis and is a textbook recommended for law students back in India. The floor is yours. You have around 10 minutes to present your initiative. Thank you.
Am I audible? Before going into the presentation and introduction, a very good evening from the largest democracy of the world, and to the esteemed jury and everybody in this room. It's a humble request that don't judge us from the lenses of the West, but please give us a patient hearing to understand from the perspective of India and the East. So, unlike the previous presentations, we would not be talking about a lot of about our initiative because a big part of it is confidential in nature, but we would share whatever we can share it and which is public information. But, you know, being a lawyer, being a mediator, I have always loved the art which creates dialogue or which allows democracies to flourish in the world is the art of storytelling, which is considered to be the oldest art of interacting in the human civilization. So today we have 3 stories for you, and that's the flow of the presentation. So we'll have a story of the past from India, we'll have a story of the present India, and we'll have the story of the future India that we imagine to see. So given that, you know, as you would know, we call India as Mother India or Bharat. Though our birth certificate after independence is 75 years old, but we claim and take pride in being called as one of the oldest civilizations in the world. And given that, I will quickly run into the first story, which is the story of the past. And again, this is something we came across while we were researching for our book to find out the traces of mediation in India, and we realized that it was effectively one of the most successful environmental mediation in India. So it comes from an epic called the Mahabharata, so which we also consider as a religious text. But for a person like me, working with a policy think tank, I look at it as a learning piece rather than a religious text. So, you know, this story goes back to 3,000 years old or little more than that. So what happened is there was a king called Parikshit, and the king was a wonderful king, nice to his subjects, was strong against his opponents. Suddenly someday he started feeling that he would die because of a snake bite, and he asked his fellows to protect him in the best possible way so that he doesn't die out of a snake bite. So what they did, they took him to the topmost chamber of his palace, put him in closed tight room where all that was allowed to get in was the air, and food was stored in abundance so that he is able to eat. A very little supply was required. So given that, suddenly he had to chew an apple. Out of that apple, okay, so this is a story. So let's not, we can imagine it like Harry Potter, but I do not know whether in the modern world we'd consider it completely real. So out of the apple, came out a worm which took the form of a snake called Takshak, and it bit him. So he died. That's where the human sentiment of revenge came into play. So his son, called Janmejaya, called up the priests, called up the saints, and said, I want to do a fire ceremony, which in India we call yagya, and I want to ensure that all the snakes on earth are burnt. So suddenly, when he was wanting and starting to do that fire ceremony, an independent, neutral, strange-looking guy appeared with the name called Astik. So, and he requested Janmejaya, can you please stop this fire sacrifice of all the snakes on earth, because this would lead to a great disaster. Then Janmejaya, because he was the son, he was filled with revenge and wanted to kill all the snakes. He said, why the hell should I hear you? He said, if you can see, I am a strange appearance. I am half snake. I am half human, because my mother was a snake and my father was a human. So I am a neutral person, and I am here to convince you why not to do this. Then he goes back to a story which was related to the respective family of the snake and Janmejaya. So he went to the great-grandparents of Janmejaya and said, when they were trying to build the Bharat, which is now India, there was a part of the kingdom called Indraprasth. While creating Indraprasth, they tried to burn down and destroy a forest called Khandaban. In the process, what happened, most of these snakes died, and the Takshak, who was responsible for biting Parikshit, was one of the child of the many snakes that died. So it was left orphan. So just the way you are wanting to fight for your father and kill the entire snake kingdom, he also wanted to take the revenge, which he did. But if you look at it in the balance theory, your great-grandparents killed many. After a few generations, he has killed one. So if we don't put a full stop here, this cycle would be never ending, and you both would end up killing each other. Plus, if you end up eliminating all the snakes on earth, it would lead to a great ecological disaster, because as I'm sure most of you would be aware, there is a food chain. There is ecological balance, which all kind of creatures on earth bring it, be it human or be it animals. Even for that reason, plants too also have a life. Said so, he convinced Janmejaya not to carry out the fire sacrifice. So this is what we consider the first case of what we are calling ROW, right of way negotiation or environmental mediation, as per maybe for the Western world called mythological India, but for an Indian like me, I would consider it a very old history which is not documented well and a lot of evidence being destroyed. So as you can see this slide, any one of you who have been to Mumbai, because most of the Western world knows India majorly either by Mumbai or New Delhi, and I come from New Delhi. So this is one of the successful bridges that was constructed, and the first bridge in India which was constructed over a sea line to reduce the congestion and traffic in Mumbai, and it is considered to be one of the most successful infrastructure projects in India. Sea Link is the first bridge in India built over open seas. It symbolizes the story of India's infrastructure development. Next slide. If you ever cross the Sea Link, you will notice how you encounter more than a mile of small slums on one side of the bridge as soon as you cross over the sea and reach the other side. You will reach some of the poshest and costliest residential real estate in India. My story is about the mile-long slum, a village called Worli Koliwada. The village of Worli Koliwada is a fishing village in the middle of Mumbai next to the bridge. According to local research, the bridge has made fishing dangerous in the open seas of that area. The dumping of construction debris is slowly killing the breeding ground for the fish and the coral reef of the area. Then we go to another picture. Again, it's pertaining to Mumbai. But again, not just Mumbai, India is a land of contradictions. It is also the home of the world's largest beach cleanup drive, completely driven by citizens and civil society organizations. This is the photograph of Versova Beach before cleanup in 2015 and after 3 years of continued cleanup in 2018. The drive is still continuing and thousands of Mumbaikars get up on Sunday morning, including some of the famous celebrities, and there are shows around it. They put up their tracks, which are, I find it pretty expensive to go and do this work, but they put up their tracks, go to the field, and they start cleaning it, based on which lot of local Mumbaikars started thinking, if celebrities can do this, why shouldn't we do it? The next picture on the left is the aerial view of Dharavi, the biggest slum of the world, and the other photo on the slide shows how it is right next to the Mumbai International Airport. Just a data point here, prior to COVID, Mumbai had one of the highest number of flights flying in and flying out, which was clocked at 1,000 flights a day. Any further expansion of the airport shall require relocation of at least a part of this slum. But many of you may be aware that Dharavi is one of the most visited tourist places in Mumbai. If any of you have seen the Oscar nominated and which won, the Slumdog Millionaire was based on Dharavi slum. Because it is also the most powerful microeconomies of the city. The micro enterprises of Dharavi contribute GDP of roughly USD 1 billion annually to the Indian economy. So, talking about the previous contradictions, so this was the story of the present. I told you the story of the past. My colleague would speak about the story of the future that we see India is.
So, as we've been telling you guys, India is a land of contradictions. In the photo before you, there's a bridge. It's in Mizoram, in northeast of India. It's existing as of now, and this is a bridge. It's special because it's called a living tree bridge. It is built by tribals of the Khasi tribe. They built it by encouraging two ficus trees to the roots of the ficus trees to merge into each other. Building this bridge takes years, perhaps decades, much longer than a bridge built of concrete. But this bridge also lasts for at least a century without any maintenance requirements. And so, as you see, in India, we are huge. We are poised to be one of those emerging economies of the world where a lot of infrastructure development is going to happen because the economic activities are increasing and the need for infrastructure is increasing. And we have so many contradictions. On one end, we have extreme development causing problems. On the other hand, we have deep tribal pockets who have acute belief in sustainability and sustainable measures, and they have climate change. In a way, climate change is embedded in our culture. But the problem is that we are at the crossroads of development and at the crossroads where we have to manage our development pace along with the climate change obligations. So, next slide, please. And so this brings me to the last story of the day. Much later, after Bridge Policy Think Tank actually submitted its initiative with the World Forum for Democracy, recently in 2021, the United Nations has confirmed that infrastructure development is responsible for 79% of total greenhouse gas emissions and 88% of all adaptation costs. And so green initiatives and climate change tweaks in the infrastructure sector are absolutely essential. India is one of the biggest receivers of foreign investment. We received foreign investment of USD 81.72 billion in 2021 alone. Approximately USD 8 billion of that investment came from European countries investing in Indian infrastructure sector. Now, you see, we human beings, we are perhaps the most, perhaps will be a word that I will use, we're perhaps the most intelligent creatures on this planet. But we are also the ones with the highest sense of entitlement. And that's one of the biggest factors, perhaps, that is a barrier to making climate change sustainability possible. But you see, this sense of entitlement is a shared common factor between the infrastructure companies that wish to undertake infrastructure development, as well as the local people who both believe that they have the right to exploit the natural resources. So the locals also believe that the right to exploit the natural resources belongs only to them, and the infrastructure companies think, oh, we're big, we know what we're doing, and hence we have the right to decide what happens with the natural resources. Now what do? We have developed a process of right-of-way negotiations. Right-of-way negotiations are something very common that happen in the infrastructure sector. So I'll tell you very briefly. If someone is making a national highway, he will be told, oh, you have to make this national highway. It's 4,000 kilometers long, and it'll pass through cities, it'll pass through villages, it'll pass through agricultural land, it'll pass through tribal areas, it may even pass through thick evergreen forests, which was one of the challenges that we faced in one of the projects that we implemented. Now, so the infrastructure company is required to acquire patches of land for undertaking its infrastructure development. And in this case, this is where the first interaction between the big investor and the local inhabitants happens. Now, we've created a system where we wish to create a bridge between the rich Indian culture of the past to the India of the future. And we are, in a way, resurrecting Astik Rishi, as Anurup pointed out in his first story. We believe that it is very important in infrastructure projects that when they begin, a neutral third-party facilitator who is trained and experienced in peaceful consensus building and facilitated negotiation actually intervenes between the developers and the local communities. They are involved from the very beginning of the project. As soon as the first interaction, just even before the first interaction happens between the infrastructure company and the local communities, we intervene. We establish processes, we do stakeholder mappings, we identify the key influencers in the area, we identify the key stakeholders, we go and talk to them, we explain to them why the project is happening in the area, what are the regions that are going to be impacted by the project. And instead of making it a one-way communication where we are telling them, we know better, this is what is going to happen here, and this is the mandate, and it's non-negotiable. We say, so here's the plan. What do you think? And we engage with the local community. I'll take just one more minute. And we engage with the local community, create local dialogue processes, and in a way, create a shared space for discussion where everybody can voice their concerns. Now, I will very briefly just touch upon our experience. We helped with a project where there was a long-distance power transmission line running through 3 states, 3 very different geographies, coastal area, an evergreen forest, and a plateau region, running through tribal areas of leaf collectors from the forest. We had to deal with all these stakeholders. So some of the key challenges that we've faced in implementing these projects, the other one was relocation of neighborhoods around an active mine. And so the key challenges we faced, first of all, something that we didn't expect but exists a lot, and we're all dealing with it right now, is fake news. The moment an infrastructure project is launched in any area, the first thing that happens is that fake news circulation increases. And when you don't have established processes of dialogue among local communities, the development companies, and the government instrumentalities who very much want the infrastructure development, this fake news becomes rampant. There is violence, there is delay, government loses money, and the community loses an opportunity to increase its potential. With this project, the company was able to also align its obligations. Infrastructure companies were able to create dialogue with the local communities. There is a mandatory requirement for corporate social responsibility in India, and companies are required mandatorily to spend a portion of their money in CSR activities. And the infrastructure companies, using dialogue with local communities, were able to identify what the local needs were from the local people and invest their CSR budgets in helping them value add to those things. An unexpected benefit of this shared space initiative was government involvement. The shared space also became a place where the government came to and said, wow, this is a wonderful place and we would like to implement our government schemes through this shared space. Local governments, there were local vegetable gardens that were initiated near the projects. Childcare centers became places for implementation of nutritional schemes. Local museums were created by the infrastructure company, and they became a place to sell subsidized indigenous art, which is one of the major driving forces of the micro, small, and medium enterprises in India. Relocation of mines created local employment. A very unexpected benefit which the infrastructure companies did not expect was the guidance that they received from the local people, the civil engineers on the weather, climate, and the topography of the area where they were operating. They were able to get together to solve not just environmental and community problems, but also create innovative engineering solutions that were perhaps more sustainable due to local and indigenous knowledge.
Thank you so much.